And I'm not sure if you can focus that a little better, perhaps by coming in a little bit. Doctor, in this document, we are seeing both typewritten information and what appears to be handwritten information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you review this document in the form that we see it here?
Yes, I did.
And when you reviewed it initially, did it have any handwriting on it?
No.
If Mr. Fairlow can scan down now on the document, and I'm not sure how much further you can go and keep the top part of addendum report still visible. Doctor, there appear to be, for example, under addendum opinion, there's a line running horizontally through those words. There's material with a wavy line and so forth. Can you give us some idea of how all of this information came to be on this particular page?
Some of the handwriting is mine and some of them may be Golden's, but my handwriting is where, if you see page 6, item 5, I have written saying that line 1 amended as originally. I can't read the handwriting, this computer screen here. If you can give me the original document, I'll be able to read it.
All right. I'm not sure that we need to at this particular
So
moment.
basically, I was involved in instructing him how the addendum should be filed, because it has to follow the format of our addendums so that people understand what the addendum is in correcting the original report.
When you discussed this report with him, did you also discuss a draft report for Ronald Goldman?
Yes, I did.
And when you say you instructed him, did you instruct him with respect to the actual content or the form or both? Tell us.
It was mainly the format, but I did bring up the point about the cerebral contusion, which he had failed to address in the original report, which was obviously present in the whole jar. So that information was discussed with him, which is not format, but rather content. And I did also discuss my opinion on the directions of the appearance of the wounds in Ron Goldman on the left and right side of the neck. And he seemed to, he also agreed with me at that point on the directions of the wounds in the neck.
Let me put up now another one of the blow-ups. This is 8B. And ask, Doctor, is this the final product, if you will, following your discussion with Dr. Golden regarding the draft addendum for Nicole Brown Simpson?
Can I? Yes.
What is the date that that was issued, Doctor?
It was issued on July 1st, 1994.
Can you approximate when you talked with Dr. Golden about the draft itself?
If I recall, it was on, I think, June 30th.
On the second page of the blow-up, you see at the bottom under Dr. Golden's name, the letter T and a date 6-30-94. Does that have any significance to you in identifying the date you discussed the draft with Dr. Golden?
Yes.
What is that?
That is the day the report was transcribed.
Now, Doctor, I want to flip the page one more time. On this same blow-up with the Form 14, microscopic description. Are you familiar with the circumstances under which this document came to be produced?
Yes, as I told you, when the omission of the description of the cerebral contusion was discussed, the whole jar was retrieved. This is after Dr. Barden and I examined on June 22nd. We examined the whole jar, and Dr. Golden looked at the contusion, and he had submitted it for storage, and we submitted a microscopic section. And this is the microscopic examination report of the contusion of the brain, which was not addressed in the original autopsy report, but addressed in the addendum.
Doctor, are these addendum reports, both with respect to Nicole Brown Simpson and with respect to Ronald Goldman, reports that are generated in the ordinary course of business for the coroner's office?
Yes, we issue addendums. As I mentioned earlier, we try hard not to make mistakes. When mistakes are made, they are reviewed, corrected, and an addendum is issued. The original report stays, and you also have the addendum report. There's nothing to hide. We made a mistake, and we corrected it.
Doctor, in your two wound summary charts, Exhibits 350 and 351, have you attempted to identify where in any addendum for Nicole Brown Simpson on 350 and where on any addendum for Ronald Goldman on the wound chart 351 there was any reference in an addendum to any injury you observed in any of the autopsy photographs? You're staring at me like, boy, that question makes no sense whatsoever. Let me try again.
Please.
Basically, did you try and put on your wound charts an entry or reference where in each of the addendums you could find a reference by Dr. Golden to some injury or wound or finding that you saw in a corresponding photograph?
Yes, I did, on these charts which we just discussed, yes.
Now, Doctor, let me take this down. Let me give you back all of the protocols and forms. Doctor, have you examined every report by Dr. Golden generated in the course of the Nicole Brown Simpson case?
Yes, I have.
Have you examined all of the tissue that has been preserved as a result of the autopsy performed by Dr. Golden?
Yes, I have. Gross examination and the microscopic exam.
Have you examined all toxicology reports that have been generated as a result of the autopsy of Nicole Brown Simpson?
Yes, I have.
Have you examined all consultation reports, which we'll get into in detail later, but for our present purposes, Dr. Vale's odontology report,
Yes.
Dr. Bodger's radiology report,
Yes.
Mr. Dowell, Steve Dowell's report of an examination?
Yes.
Have you examined all evidence available to you from the autopsy records for the purposes of independently, if you can, forming an opinion as to the cause of death of Nicole Brown Simpson?
Yes.
And independently forming an opinion similarly with respect to the same materials, obviously different content, but same general nature of materials, for Ronald Goldman?
Yes, I have.
Doctor, what is your opinion to a reasonable medical certainty as to the cause of Nicole Brown Simpson's death?
She died of multiple sharp force injuries.
As a result of multiple sharp force injuries, what happened to her body to cause death?
She had injury to major vascular structures which caused bleeding, and she died as a result of the hemorrhage and the effects of the hemorrhage from these injuries.
As a lay term, she bled to death. Would that be accurate?
That would be an accurate statement.
With respect to Ronald Goldman, did you form an opinion as to the cause of death, which you hold to a reasonable medical certainty?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
He also died of multiple sharp force injuries.
Did you form an opinion from your review of all of these materials as to whether a single-edged knife could have caused all of the sharp force injuries received by Nicole Brown Simpson?
Yes.
What is your opinion?
My opinion is that a single-edged knife could have caused all the injuries in Miss Nicole Brown Simpson.
And is that one single-edged knife?
Yes.
Can you approximate the dimensions of any such knife that could have caused all of the sharp force injuries received by Nicole Brown Simpson?
It'll be difficult to exactly pinpoint the exact measurements of a weapon, but you could have because you won't know the full dimension of the weapon from the base to the tip.
I'm sorry.
Because you cannot gauge the total measurement of the weapon from the base to the tip.
Do you have an opinion as to the approximate minimum dimensions of any single-edged knife which could have caused all of the sharp force injuries to Nicole Brown Simpson?
I made an opinion for both the cases together.
All right, let me save that question then until I ask you about Mr. Goldman's case. Did you form an opinion as to whether or not a single-edged knife could have caused all of the sharp force injuries received by Ronald Goldman?
Yes.
What is your opinion?
A single-edged knife could have caused all the injuries of Ron Goldman.
Did you form an opinion as to whether the same single-edged knife which could have caused all of the sharp force injuries to Nicole Brown Simpson could also have caused all of the sharp force injuries to Ronald Goldman?
Yes, I have.
What is your opinion in that regard?
The same single-edged knife could have caused the injuries on both the dissidents.
Doctor, now let me revisit that question I asked you a moment ago. Do you have an opinion as to the approximate minimum dimensions that any such knife would have?
I can only give an approximate estimation because, as I told you, because of the variabilities of different class characteristics of weapons and injury patterns, my estimate, if somebody was looking for a knife, would be a 6-inch long blade, single-edge cutting blade with a blunt edge up to 1/8 inch in width and about 3/4 inch wide. This is just an approximate estimation because of all the variabilities I have discussed this afternoon. In knife wounds, it's best to get a weapon and then see whether the weapon matches all the wounds in the body or could have caused all the wounds in the body. And I've already given you my discussions on it. So this is my rough estimate of wound dimensions as I just opined.
Again, just for class characteristics, Doctor, Exhibit 333, and talking about the minimum length of the blade, in your opinion, approximately at least 6 inches in length?
Yes.
And you talked about the thickness of the blade, a minimum of 1/8 of an inch?
No, I said up to 1/8 of an inch.
Up to 1/8 of an inch.
Yes.
All right. And the thickness of the blade at its thickest part, approximately how thick?
I mean the width of the blade.
Width, excuse me.
3/4 of an inch. And again, this is an approximate estimation. We normally like to have a weapon to compare to the wounds.
Doctor, are you able to say that, in fact, only one knife caused all of the sharp force injuries to Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman?
Yes.
What can you say on that issue?
Basically, that a single-edged knife is capable of causing all the wounds in both the victims, but I cannot exclude a double-edged knife being used in some of the wounds, but a single-edged knife could have caused all the wounds.
Doctor, from that, let me just briefly go back to one of the exhibits. And Mr. Lynch is going to have to help me out with the number. I'm not sure if it's 340. I think it is. 340. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Doctor, what you just said with respect to some of the wound appearances, is it accurate to say that from the appearance of the wound alone in some of these instances on these two cases, you could not distinguish whether it was inflicted by a single-edged knife blade or a double-edged knife blade?
That is correct.
Is it accurate that some of the wounds that you observed could only have been inflicted by a single-edged knife,
That is correct.
and all of the wounds could have been inflicted with a single-edged knife?
That is correct.
Did you see any wound that could not have been inflicted by a single-edged knife when you looked at the two cases together?
No.
Did you see any wound that told you there must, in fact, have been at least a second knife?
No.
And is it all based upon the kinds of things you talked about with respect to this chart 340?
That is correct.
Now, doctor, in the course of this review that you made, you've already identified a number of mistakes that, in your opinion, were made by Dr. Golden. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in the course of your complete review, did you find that Dr. Golden made a lot of mistakes?
I would say he made mistakes. I don't want to use the word a lot of mistakes.
Did you find, well, let me ask you in general terms, what kind of mistakes, if you can characterize them, did you find that Dr. Golden made?
The mistakes were, as I told you, he missed the brain contusion on Ms. Nicole. He failed to record the brain contusion on Nicole Brown Simpson. He also failed to describe the injury to the right thyroid cornu when he described the laryngeal structures of Nicole Brown Simpson. He made some dictating mistakes when he dictated the measurement of the wound from the diagram when he dictated the original description. These were some of the mistakes on Nicole. We are going to go into detail when the charts are discussed. Ron Goldman, the mistakes were errors where he failed to describe some wounds which were addressed in the addendum after looking at the photographs. He also had some injuries which were diagrammed, two of them, which we could not see in the photographs. So basically there were some injuries in both the victims which were not addressed in the original protocol, which were addressed in the addendum. And in my detailed review in the last few weeks, I found some other injuries which needed to be addressed, which were not addressed in either the original protocol or the addendum. Taking in total, taking all the facts together, I would say there were several mistakes in both cases, but I wouldn't say a lot of mistakes, but there were mistakes.
Doctor, it took you a long time to give that answer. Doesn't that indicate to you he made a lot of mistakes?
If you want to phrase it that way, yes.
Doctor, in fact, have you attempted to identify every mistake with respect to the most minor to the most serious?
That is correct. And as I said earlier to this jury and everybody who's watching this trial, I'm here to tell the truth as it is and present the coroner's findings and discuss the cause and manner of death and the interpretation of the injuries.
So, doctor, if we use as an example a failure of Dr. Golden to identify an injury in the protocol, if we call that a mistake, and we say that his failure to diagram it on a form that is available, that's also a mistake. And if, in fact, he didn't address it in the addendum report that you've identified, and we consider that a mistake, out of that one injury, we would have 3 mistakes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Doctor, using that type of criteria, did you, in fact, find that Dr. Golden made upwards of 30 or more mistakes?
I didn't count them. That would be a fair statement.
Now, Dr. Golden is a friend and colleague of yours, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you pulled any punches in trying to identify mistakes?
No.
Have you evaluated, to the best of your expertise, the significance, if any, of each mistake as it causes you to evaluate the issue of cause of death?
I have.
Manner of death?
I have.
Whether one knife caused all of these sharp force injuries?
I have.
Whether one person murdered these 2 human beings?
I have.
On the amount of time these 2 people lived from the times the first injuries were inflicted on each?
I have.
On the issue of how much blood flowed from any particular wound?
I have.
On the issue of the time of death, trying to estimate a specific or a range for time of death?
I have.
On the source or sources for any blunt force trauma injury that was identified from your photographic review?
I have.
Did you find, in your opinion, that any of these mistakes had any significance to you in being able to form opinions on each of those issues?
None.
Doctor, when we go through bit by bit and photograph by photograph, I'll ask you to spell out why it is you feel that, taking into account all of these mistakes, not one of them, in your opinion, was significant.
That is correct.
By the
For the
way,
issues we discussed.
Doctor, how about collectively? Setting aside just any one, let's take them all together. Significant to you on any of the issues I identified?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, I have some photographs to be marked for identification, a single board to start with. I'm going to ask, if I could, to have Mr. Lynch help me with some of the oversized boards that we'll be using. And I think Mr. Tertlow is going to handle the wound chart for Nicole Brown Simpson on the element.
Mr. Kelberg, would you show briefly to Mr. Shapiro the photo chart that you're going to use first?
I'd be delighted, Your Honor.
All right, why don't you hold it right? Yeah, let me ask Mr. Shapiro to come over there.
Your Honor, I would ask that the board of photographs be marked as, I believe it's 3.
Interesting number. Never mind.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Never mind. Just to...
I know there's. I want to be certain that with my clumsiness, I don't inadvertently display them. So if I could ask Mr. Lynch when he's done to help me put this board on the easel. Let me get on the other side. And Doctor, I'm going to ask if you would please to step down, bring a pointer with you if you would. Bring your wound charts on Nicole Brown Simpson. Did I take it back from you, Doctor? And Doctor, I'm going to ask that you keep your voice up, please, as we go through the testimony regarding these particular photographs. Doctor, first of all, do each of these photographs on this exhibit 352 fairly and accurately depict the condition of Nicole Brown Simpson at the time of the autopsy on June 14, 1994?
Yes.
Keep your voice up, please.
Yes.
Are all of these photographs, which were in fact taken in the manner that you described earlier today in your testimony, on June 14, 1994?
Yes.
Now, Doctor, there is a description that has been written in ink, not a description, but a number, a B and some number that is underneath. It's kind of faint, but it will be used as a reference to which photographs we're looking at. Is that your understanding?
That is correct.
Doctor, I want to begin with a photograph that's in the middle of the bottom row, photograph B13. Is this one of the photographs you reviewed?
Yes, I did.
Is there anything of significance that you see in this particular photograph?
Yes, before I describe each photograph, I will discuss what is in the photograph, but I like to refer to the chart I prepared with reference to the exact measurements.
If you would, please, and Doctor, do your best if you could. There's a microphone, I believe, that's been placed just about where you're standing, so you'll keep your voice up, please.
B13 is a photograph of the facial region of Ms. Simpson, and it depicts the fatal large stab/incised wound to the front of the neck. It starts from the left side of the neck and goes upwards to the right side, extending to just below the ear, but you can't see it in this frontal view photograph. You can also see a portion of one of the stab wounds of the left side of the neck.
Doctor, did you, using a one-to-one photograph, measure the nature of the wound that we see, this stab insides wound you described in photograph B13?
Yes, as I told you earlier, this photograph only shows portions of the major stab/incise wound. In the 1:1 photograph, the portion seen measured 3.5 inches by 1.25 inches, and this wound, as you can see, transects the thyrohyoid area, which is the area between the voice box, which is the larynx, and above the voice box there is a bone called the hyoid bone. It is a
that the wound appears to have from that photograph.
Yes, studying the description of the injuries plus the photograph, you see that this end has got a sharp end, and also when you see photograph B16, you'll see the right end of that same wound is also sharp. So this wound is a incise slash stab wound. That is, the knife started as an incise wound and then penetrated the neck area, and it traversed from left to right going upwards. And if you look carefully, there's another photograph which you can see, which I have reviewed, which shows a bridge of tissue there, which would indicate that is the starting point of this wound. And if you review the description, the area of the description of the structures in the deeper portion of the neck were injured more on the left side compared to the right side. So basically the wound was deeper on the left side, and as it went to the right side, it became shallower.
What is the significance, if any, of that observation?
That would also support the opinion that the wound was inflicted in a left to right direction.
Now, Doctor, in the photograph B13, there appears to be an area that is, as you look at the photograph, to the right of the end of that, or the beginning, as you've testified, of that stab-incised wound. What is that area?
That is the left side of the neck, and that has a stab wound there.
Doctor, I would like to invite your attention to photograph B18, which is the leftmost photo on the lower row of this exhibit 352. What is shown in this photo, if it bears on what I just asked you?
You can see the stab wound, the lowest of the 4 stab wounds on the neck. The left side of the neck has 4 stab wounds. They'll be numbered 1 through 4 from superior toward the top of the head to inferior. And I'm referring to stab wound number 4 here, which is the one which you see a portion of it here.
And here being photograph B13.
Yes.
Doctor, in inviting your attention to B18 and what appears to be on the leftmost portion of the neck of Nicole Brown Simpson, what are we seeing there?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I'm sorry, if you'll give me the pointer for just a second.
Yeah.
I'm referring to this area on the photograph. What are we seeing there?
That is the leftmost portion of this large incise / stab wound, which I already described.
Is the appearance of that stab wound, that area, of significance to you?
Yes. This is what I wanted to bring up. It's a sharp pointed end, and so it started as an incised wound, but then you see a small bridge of tissue there where the penetration of the knife took place, where there's a penetrating component to this wound which started as an incised wound, but there's a penetrating component. You can see a bridge there, and then the wound continues transecting the structures I already discussed. There's also injury to the vessels I told you in the neck.
Doctor, what vessels are in that area of the neck?
Both sides, you have the carotid arteries on both sides and the jugular veins, and the carotid artery was transected on both sides.
What does transect mean?
That is, it was literally divided into 2 pieces.
What is the effect of transecting a carotid artery?
Massive bleeding.
And what will be the reaction of the body to a transection of either the left or right side carotid artery?
Bleeding, and you could have sudden loss of supply to one side of the front of the brain. You could have seizures, and then ultimately you could die because of the rapid bleeding from this large vessel.
Doctor, the jugular vein, left or right side, will produce what kind of body reaction if transected?
That can cause bleeding. Sometimes jugular vein transection can result in air being sucked into the vein and causing air embolism. But the principal usual effect of cutting of any vessel is bleeding.
Doctor, inviting your attention to B16, excuse me, does this give a fuller depiction of the depth of that major stab incised wound?
Yes, this is the thyroid. I'm talking about B16 now. You can see the thyroid area transected, and if you look behind the larynx, the stab wound is also, the incised / stab wound is also passed through the hypopharynx or the pharynx, that is the structure behind the larynx, and you also have evidence that the sharp force injury has caused injury to the cervical spine. This is the spine you're seeing here in this photograph right here.
In photograph B16, and you're pointing to approximately the middle portion of the wound itself, is that correct?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm sorry.
And then what you see here as pale structures is the carotid jugular vein area. In the neck, the jugular vein is on the outer side of the carotid artery, and they both are in a sheath called the carotid sheath. It's a covering around those structures there. So if you read the description of the autopsy report, the left and right carotid arteries both were transected. The left jugular vein was almost transected. There was only a bit of the vein left in the back. But on the right side, the jugular vein was only had a 1/4 inch cut. And this is significant because this also would go along with the opinion that the wound was deeper on the left side and shallower on the right side because the vein was only partially cut. As I told you, the vein is on the outside of the artery. So that would also support that opinion that the wound is shallower on the right side compared to the left side, which would again go with my opinion that the wound was from left to right, going upward to below the ear.
All right, Mr. Kelberg, would you wind it up?
All right, could I have just a couple more
Yeah,
questions?
no, I'm just giving you,
Warning. Doctor, inviting your attention again to B16, did you examine the, what I'll call margins of this major incise stab wound, as well as its depiction in B13, as well as its depiction in B18?
Yes.
What are the margins?
The margins don't show any, margins are the borders of this large wound, the borders, and they do not show any additional cuts.
Is that of significance to you?
It is of significance to me because that means there was no resistance whatsoever when that wound was being inflicted.
Doctor, what would you expect a person who was about to receive that kind of wound to do if the person was physically capable of doing anything?
Objection, calls for speculation.
sustain.
Doctor, in your experience, have you studied how people react to threats of incise stab wounds?
Yes?
Doctor, given the absence of cuts around the margin, I'm sorry, withdraw that question. Assuming that Nicole Brown Simpson had the capacity, physical capacity, to try and avoid that major stab incise wound being inflicted, what would you expect her to try and do?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Doctor, if there were cuts along the margin, what, if any, significance would it have to you in identifying what, if anything, Nicole Brown Simpson had done before or during the infliction of that wound?
Objection, compound, calls for speculation.
Oral.
You may answer the question, Doctor.
If you have additional cuts, that would support that there was some struggle involved, there was some movement of the neck and head involved, so it was not a clean-cut wound as I see it here.
Doctor, if Nicole Brown Simpson was unconscious at the time that that major stab incise wound was inflicted, would that be consistent with your identification of no cuts around the margin of that stab incise wound?
Objection, improper hypothetical.
Oral.
You may answer the question, Doctor.
That would go along with the findings of no additional cuts, single major incise/stab wound, which runs from the left to the right, deeper on the left, shallower on the right, opinion I have given.
Doctor, did you form an opinion after your review of all of the material, all of the photographs, as to when, in the relationship of the receipt of all of the injuries that Nicole Brown Simpson received, that this major stab/incise wound was inflicted?
Yeah, based on all the crime scene photographs which I had opportunity to see, based on the blood flow on the ground, based on the lack of any blood on the back of the left hand, my opinion is that Miss Brown was on the ground, face down, when this wound was inflicted. My opinion is that the head was extended backwards and the knife was used to cause this incise/stab wound from the left to the right.
Doctor, if you can, if I can slide over here for a moment, and if you could use me in my head and hair, would you demonstrate what is your opinion as to the manner in which that last major incise stab wound was inflicted?
Objection, improper demonstration.
Oral.
No
You,
foundation.
you may do that, Doctor.
Assuming that you are face down on the ground and this ruler is my weapon, I would expect the head to be hyperextended this way and start an incision this way from the right side of the neck, run in a horizontal manner, and go upwards towards the ear, with this part being the deeper portion and this part being the shallower portion. And the blood flow pattern on the ground, which I saw in the crime scene photographs, the lack of additional cuts, the deeper wound on the left side compared to the shallower wound on the right side would support this opinion.
And a 6-inch long knife blade would be consistent with doing that kind of wound?
It would be capable of doing this wound.
All right.
Your Honor, just
Yes,
may I just take this down?
please. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the evening. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not form any opinions about this case. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you. Do not conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. All right, as far as the jury is concerned, we'll stand in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.